We're on page 72. You're right. In Halakha Chaf Vav 26, we were saying that you shouldn't touch food or drink until you wash your hands in the morning. You have an extra.
For which washing of the hands? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2.
It seems like that first one that we washed. That 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2.
Okay, that one.
Or 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2.
I picked up his other saying 1, 2, 1, 2.
In the morning.
We're going to come to a very interesting halakha right now. Alright, Mishnatali Adav Shacharit. One who washed his hands Shacharit in the morning. See Chavav?
Yeah.
Yeah? It's the second paragraph in the halakha. Mishnatal, one who washed Yadav, his hands Shacharit in the morning. Ela Shelo Natlan Kehalacha, but he did not wash them according to the halachic method. Not according to halakha. He didn't do 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. He just washed his hands. V'naga b'dvar ma'achal or mashke, and he touched either ma'achal, either food, or mashke. What is mashke? Drink. Very good. Lo ne'esru, they have not become prohibited bin giyato, because he touched them. If somebody washed their hands in the morning, even though they didn't wash their hands according to halakha, he doesn't have to throw away this food or get rid of this food, because the food he touched is okay.
Not according to halakha, just under the sink.
That's what it says. And we're going to see that clearer in the next sentence. V'lachen, and therefore, mutar liknot lechem ushar minei ma'achalim. You could buy lechem, bread, ushar minei ma'achalim, and other foods. B'tzarchania, this is the fancy Hebrew word for a grocery store.
Oh.
Because what's the question? Tell me what's the question about a grocery store in Israel.
Not observant owners.
A lot of non-observant Jewish owners that need to technically wash their hands before they touch the food, but they don't wash their hands before they touch the food. Netilat yadayim. Rather, just in the morning they wash their hands. The question is, can you eat the food that comes from their grocery store? Afilu ksheyesh chashash, even when there's a worry, a doubt, a suspicion, a fear is the best word. Shema ha'poalim, whether the workers, or balei abayit, the owners, shehem Yehudim, which are Jewish, but, like you said, sheinam shomrei Torah mitzvot, they don't observe Torah and mitzvot. Nageu, they touched beotam minei ma'achalim, the food that you're about to buy, below sheitlu yedehem, without washing their hands, kedat uchedin, according to halakha. Ela, rather, rak shtafum b'mayim l'tzorech nekayom bilvad. Rather, they only wash their hands in the morning for cleanliness, like you said, under the sink. They wash their hands. That is enough for the food or drink that they touch to not become prohibited.
So regular washing of hands is adequate.
Yes.
That's only Jews, not non-Jews.
Yeah, we're going to get to non-Jews just a second. Good question. You always know you're onto something good if it's the next halakha. Then you know, like, oh, see, I'm onto something. Let me just see a moment. Why? Why is this washing of your hands in the morning under the sink? Does that get rid of the ruach ra?
No.
No, how do you get rid of the ruach ra, the evil spirit?
1, 2.
1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, right? So, what did this guy do that now you're allowed to buy his food at the grocery store?
1, 2, 1, 2 is Kabbalistic.
But that's what we're worried about.
According to halakha, 1 and 1 is enough.
Not to get rid of ruach ra, only to clean your hands.
They buy grocery here, stand here, look.
Okay, good. So you can
You can eat food that has ruach ra. That has
Problem is
any uncleanliness, though, is an issue.
Here we're worried about ruach ra'ah. That's what we're talking about.
But if you can't get rid of it,
His hands are still impure then, if you only wash regular hand washing with soap.
But till the fruit or vegetable enters the store, it passed through hundreds of hands.
Yeah.
Goyim, Jewish, observant, not observant, whatever.
You're just making our problem worse.
Anything.
You can't control that.
Anyway,
Assuming that they all wash their hands in the morning when they wake
all
up.
over them.
They wash their face. They wash their hands. Hopefully.
The health department didn't say that.
they have signs in all the restaurants and stores, when you go in the bathroom there, leves los manos, wash
Yeah.
the hands, right?
But, how many people handle the food between the farm and the grocery store?
That's exactly what we're saying.
Well, there has to be some chesed there because there's many Jews who never do once the ritual washing their hands their whole life.
Yeah, people
Got
that.
in this basin.
Non-Jews don't know about it. They don't
can't
know.
buy anything.
But if it has an effect,
Yeah, we took that only glass and metal accepts Tumah. Is food accepts Tumah also?
Only
Glass and metal that
Any-
accepts Tumah.
no any material that's made into a kli, into has any purpose to it. Any non-natural material, non-natural meaning it doesn't grow. Metal, for example, is a natural material but it doesn't grow. Those are all mekabel tumah automatically. The things, that means they receive impurity. Wood, for example, is a tree. Tree is not mekabel tumah until you cut it down and you intend this to have a purpose. For example, I'm going to use this to make a bowl, or I'm going to use this to build a wall in my house. All those things now give it a purpose, which will let it have tumah.
So what about fruit of the tree?
It's an interesting question. That seems to be there's a difference between tumah and this ruach ra'ah concept. I'm not a baki, I'm not an expert in laws of tumah because unfortunately we don't have a Beit Mikdash that we're so careful about.
But what's the difference between Tumah and Ruach?
It seems to me that there's a difference. One can go on everything food or drink related, and one only has to do with certain elements. It seems like they're not synonymous. Let's see what we said above. Let's look above. Go back to page 71. The last halakha we did on page 71.
Thank you.
It says, we said at the end of 71, Umi shelo natan. You see where I am? Umi shelo. It's the last halakha in the halakha brand, in the middle of the page. It's after Chafei, the next paragraph. Yeah? Umi shenatal yadav, Umi shelo natal yadav shachrit kal. Someone who did not wash his hands for shachrit at all. V'naga b'dvar ma'achal u'mashke, and he touched either food or drink. Mikar din, according to the basic halakha, ein oto davar ma'achal o mashke netzar b'diavad. That davar ma'achal, that food or drink, is not prohibited b'diavad, after the fact. V'amachmir b'zeh b'mkom she'ein hefsed me'ubeh, and one who is strict about this, in a place where there is not a great loss, tava alav bracha, should be praised, blessed. What does it mean after the fact? I mean, we're saying that ideally, should you touch this food? No. Why? There's an idea not to touch the food. What if it was already touched?
how could you know that?
What is? It could be yourself.
Yeah, you.
Oh, you.
What if you already touched it?
Yeah. In the middle of the night, you woke
Exactly.
up and touched the water, and
You thought it was your alarm clock. I don't know, you touched it. So what does b'diavad mean? After the fact, it's okay.
They're saying like, try to restrain yourself from doing it, but if you actually do it, it's okay to consume it.
That's what
Like
it's saying.
precaution. Than
So that means that Ruach Ra is not a big deal.
Not such a big deal. A big deal, yeah. Not such a big deal.
So it's not obligate. It's not mandatory, but it is recommended.
So here's what we have to understand, though. Saying it's not such a big deal is not a good enough reason. Saying that it's not mandatory is also not such a good enough reason.
slips the crack.
I guess it's more if you realize later, oops, I forgot to wash. You don't have to go and offer a sacrifice for.
Go back to bed. Get up.
Let me ask you a question. And this question you might not like, but it's important to note. What if somebody uses, let's give you an example. You go to the store, in the olden days, not today, okay, machines, listen to my story. You go to the store like they used to do to buy honey. How do they make honey? Just to boil this honey in a pot. You know that this non-Jew who's selling you the honey, he uses that pot every night to make his family chicken soup. And you know his chicken isn't kosher. He washes it out before he makes the honey. But what's the halakha about the honey? You want to come buy the honey. Are you allowed to say, oh, listen, it was probably nullified in 60 because there's more honey than there is remains of the chicken soup inside of the pot? Or is this a classic example of ein mevatlin isur lechatchila? This concept of nullified in 60 is only after the fact. You can't intentionally eat things that were nullified in 60. You can't say, oh, I like a little bit of cream in my chicken soup, so I'm going to add just a little bit so it's nullified in 60.
I'll measure carefully.
You can't do that because the whole halakha is b'di'avad, this word, after the fact. So can you eat this honey? Or can you not eat this honey?
You shouldn't eat this honey if you
shouldn't.
know. But
say
if you
not?
eat it, there's no punishment for it per se, or nothing bad.
So let's say you know. You're right. Let's ignore your case from a moment of accident, or you didn't know. You know.
You don't need it. You know, you purposely tell you so that you don't ask for food.
Yeah, you can buy honey from non-Jews in this, quadrant thing.
You can or can't.
Can. It's not boiled in something, it's just raw honey.
What if it's boiled? What if they cook the honey?
It's not good. You don't. You always buy
It's
raw
cooked
honey.
by a non-Jew.
Let's give you another example. You go to your
But
friend's
it's
house.
still like the main product, though. It's kind of like it's not like you're cooking something. It's kind of like you're dealing with. It's like you're just dealing with the substance. I don't know. Somehow it seems like it's maybe there's room that 60 wouldn't apply because it's like that's like the manufacturing process of honey.
Does it need to be cooked?
Actually, no.
No, because the raw honey is but
Everything you buy basically is raw honey now.
raw honey, no.
The Rambam talks how it's not healthy to cook it.
In the olden days, it seems like everyone cooked their honey. It seemed like this was the thing. The halakha is brought down regarding honey. The famous halakha, what happens if you cook the honey and it still has bees in it? Do the bees make your honey not kosher now that you cook them in it?
It's kind of weird because you can't eat bees, but bees are
They make kosher
they
things.
kosher things. Yeah.
These are
Except for royal jelly.
Bees are not kosher.
By the way, it's honey.
Royal jelly's not kosher.
What?
certification.
Does honey need a kosher certification? If it is pure honey, and you live in a country where it's a first world country, not a third world country, or your health department has regulations, you're allowed to buy honey without hechsher. Don't be afraid. They'll scare you. Don't be
It's
afraid.
interesting though that honey is kosher, but royal jelly is not, which is another secretion of bees.
I don't know what royal jelly is.
It's another type of secretion. I think it's like a gelatinous substance as opposed to like.
Who said it's not kosher?
That's what I learned years ago.
Interesting. I don't know anything about it. I would have to look into it. I don't know.
You all can get it in Chinese markets.
Interesting.
Always wondered about that.
It's like a food supplement. People think it's got healthy properties.
It's like bee pollen.
So listen to what the Taz says. The Taz, the Turei Zahav. He says, listen, you cannot be the one to put the honey in the pot and cook it intentionally in such a pot. But if the non-Jew did it already, he didn't ask you, he does, that's what he does. That buying a product in the store is already considered b'diavad, is already considered after the fact. And you don't have to take into consideration his cooking process.
So it's kind of like what I was saying. Like it's kind of like
Because there's another halakha here. One is that this is considered b'diavad. And even if it's wrong, the Taz is saying, even if buying is not considered b'diavad, there are rabbis who say that buying is considered ideally. You could choose to buy something that wasn't cooked in such a pot. Right? It says the Taz, we have a halakha, and the halakha in Shulchan Aruch says, Stam kelim, I have this in my book, your average utensils, einam b'nei yoman, are not used within the last 24 hours. All the pots and pans in your house, most of them have not been used in the last 24 hours.
right.
And therefore halakha dictates that if someone uses a pot, and you don't know if it's a pot that was used in the last 24 hours or not, you can safely assume that it was not used in the last 24 hours. Even though it's a not kosher pot.
Not kosher or meat and milk?
Not kosher. And meat and milk. It goes both ways. This rule is not good enough on its own to say, oh, so I'll use a pot to cook whatever I want. When combined with another reason, like this b'diavad, it's good enough.
So who rules this way?
The Taz, the Turei Zahav, the main Ashkenazi commentary on Shulchan Aruch.
What about Shulchan Aruch itself?
The Shulchan Aruch leaves room to explain this way or that way. Let me tell you something. Do you know why you've never heard of this Taz before?
This is very controversial.
It's not controversial. I mean, the Taz saying something is pretty much mainstream as much as like the Shulchan Aruch saying something. The Taz is pretty mainstream.
The OU bought him
Non
out.
Ashkenazi.
Wait.
The OU bought him out.
It's not a good idea. It's not a convenient halachic ruling to share with the world. Because in essence what this means is you don't really have to worry so much about the process that things go through in the factory. So long as certain requirements are filled and you can't make the decision, you have to be a rabbi, know which ones have to be filled and don't. And that could technically mean, so what if that happens in the factory? So what if they use that machinery for X, Y, and Z? But right now when you bought it, it's already considered a b'diavad situation. It's already considered after the fact. Do you know how much we rely on this halakha, where we come from? We do this a lot. People ask me, is this kosher? Is that kosher? This is part and parcel of the learning process. So, oh, you don't know what happened in the factory and the machines they used and that. My friends, these are inventions of the modern kashrut industry. They want to show you that they're indispensable.
Yeah.
The big problem is that much of what they do is dispensable. Not everything.
Yeah.
Someone called me up recently about cheese. Rabbi, it's cheese, it's artificial, rennet, it's all the ingredients are kosher. I said, sorry. According to halakha, even if all the ingredients in cheese are kosher, cheese is not kosher unless there was a Jew supervising the cheese making process. It has nothing to do with Chalav Yisrael, by the way. Our rabbis put in a rule, and the rule is, doesn't make a difference what's in your cheese. Cheese has to be watched by a Jew, period.
But once you mentioned that not all the cheese in a supermarket is real halachical cheese.
Yes, like cream cheese.
A lot of
Cream cheese, for example, is that really a cheese?
It's more like milk.
Many rabbis consider cream cheese not to be a cheese in spite of its name.
It's a curdled.
And therefore it would be okay for the cream cheese to be made without supervision because it's not really a cheese.
Okay.
There are those who disagree,
And cottage cheese.
but that seems to be the main ruling. Cottage cheese is possibly similar, meaning many of these, I don't know what they call them, soft cheeses, could it be? I don't want to give you a definite halachic.
There's also
There are
sour
people who are
cream.
there are people who are experts in cheeses and these kind of things. It seems like the cheese process of turning it into a hard product that's what our rabbis were worried about, as opposed to these cheese that it's not so much the adding of rennet that turns it into cheese, but more letting it spoil to different degrees, which is what makes it cheese. I'm assuming that's the way that they make
fermentation.
But it's not adding of animal rennet or anything along those lines.
I think the rennet curdles it out of the milk, so it's more of a solid.
Interesting. I know there were rabbis who were opposed to cream cheese.
Hopefully you use calcite, which is a mineral, and it separates out the soy protein from the roughage. And
Sour cream. What about sour cream?
it's fermented with culture, similar to like yogurt.
Right. So yogurt, we hold that you can eat yogurt the non-Jews made. I saw someone recently argue with this halakha. What can I do? The whole world argued with the halachot. But I know for a fact that Rabbi Aaron Cutler in Lakewood used to eat milk and butter and sour cream with no hechsher on it. No hechsher on it. From the non-Jews. Forget Chalal Yisrael. I'm here talking about like nothing. No supervision, period. He's a servant in the yeshiva. How do I know? Because Rabbi Tendler, who was my rabbi, was a student. He's the first Halal Yisrael manufacturer in the United States, Rabbi Tendler. Not because he kept Halal Yisrael, but because it was a good business. So later in life, he kept Halal Yisrael because all of his products were his. The cheese, the milk. So he just free. So the yeshiva kept Halal Yisrael not because they believed in it, but because why not? It's free. So that was the way it worked in yeshiva. Wow. He was a very wealthy man because of this. Rabbi Tendler. He lived in a 2-bedroom apartment. You would never know, but he was a 2-bedroom, a small little place. No, in Baltimore, on the yeshiva campus.
It's an impressive story where he wanted to buy like a fancier car, and
right. And Rabbi Tendler was a real Baal Musar, like a real upright, ethical, not ethical, Musar. I sent you the word on your own. But Rabbi Tendler, I saw an interview with him. He was telling us the story that his grandson today lives in Lakewood. Rabbi Tendler, when he started Chalal Yisrael, he would ride on a horse and buggy out to the farms in Pennsylvania and to wherever they go and bring it back, by hand. There was no such thing as Chalal Yisrael. Rabbi Aaron Cutler, for sure, didn't keep Chalal Yisrael. The Rosh Yeshiva of Lakewood. And his grandson, Rabbi Tendler's grandson, was sitting in a school in Lakewood. And one of his rabbis said, you know how important it is to keep Chalal Yisrael? The Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Aaron Cutler, when he came to America, he didn't eat anything dairy in this country because none of it was Chalal Yisrael. And so this grandkid raised his hand and said, but my grandfather, who's his student, says he ate all the dairy stuff here without the hechsher. He's lying to you. He's changing history. So Rabbi Tendler said, I don't know who's the revisionist, him or me. He said, but I'll tell you the truth. That's what it was.
Well, we do know who has the board seat on the OU.
So here's and the OU does tremendous work for the good of the Jewish people. A lot of things that we wouldn't be able to eat. That you can go all over the country and just different places. You'll find things that are kosher. I'm not taking away from them.
Nice.
But there are certain halachot that don't lie to the people about them. The process, the factories. What could have happened over there already? Yeah, there are some things you have to worry about. But what could have happened according to this halakha? And so now add this to 2 more halachot. One is, there is an opinion in Kabbalah that there is no more ruach ra today. Most of the leniencies which we're following here in this, like if this happened, if it already happened, it relies on this opinion that even though ideally we don't take this into consideration, after the fact, there are those who say that today, because we're not holy enough, we also don't have levels of ruach ra like they used to have. Add this to an additional teaching from the Arizal. The Arizal says that when you wash your hands in the morning, to get rid of the ruach ra, you have to do 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. But he says that every time you wash your hands, you get rid of the ruach ra, you weaken it until it goes away. Which means that according to the Arizal, the level of ruach ra that you have once you wash your hands once, is it a strong level of ruach ra?
How can you measure how much it is?
Well, no, it's a weekend. It's a third weekend by when he washed his hands. Yeah. At least. A third. Which means it could be these halachot don't even apply because the level of ruach ra is not the same as one who didn't wash his hands at all. And so if you apply all of these things together, one, that buying is already considered b'diavad, it's not an ideal situation, it's already an after the fact situation. 1. 2, could be that there's no ruach ra at all anymore. 3, could be that there is ruach ra, but the ruach ra was weakened already because the guy washed his hands in the morning. That is the logic that Chacham Ovadia uses in his book. This is not a ruling of Rabbi David Yosef, this is a ruling from his father. This is the logic he uses to allow people to eat bread baked in bakeries even though you know that the people only wash their hands, not actually doing a proper netilat yadayim according to halakha.
Bread baked in kosher bakeries, right?
Yeah.
Can ruach ra leave a food or an item by itself? Does it change its status?
Like with time or something? Or...
With washing. If you wash it 3 times.
Okay, but let's say someone leaves an apple. So hypothetically, you would keep its ruach ra until...
That's what it seems like. That's a good question. That's what it seems like. There's no time expiration on the ruach ra there. Chaf Zayin, halakha Chaf Zayin on page 72. You know, this Taz that I taught you today, I was debating for a long time whether to put it in my book. Last year. Do I put it in? Do I not put it in? What happens if I put it in?
Another big controversy.
Yeah, it's one of those, maybe for volume 2.
Too lenient again.
In which book? In the one you already wrote?
The one I already wrote. Bechol Hanal, in all of the above,
We know.
in 27 on page 72, Chaf Zayin. Bechol Hanal, in all of the above, Ein Havdel, there's no difference Ben Gdolim, between adults, Uven Ktanim, in between small children. Shenagu bidvar ma'achal, which touched food, kodem netilat yadayim, before they wash their hands, shacharit, in the morning. So both adults and young people would fall into this category that, assuming that they wash their hands in the morning, it's okay to eat the food that they touched afterwards. This next halakha, we just again look at it first. This next halakha, someone asked you about a non-Jew, right?
Me, yeah.
Okay. So we're going to see this now. One moment. Okay. Im naga goy, if a non-Jew touched bidvar ma'achal o mashkeh, food or drink, what are we assuming by a non-Jew? Is that he doesn't?
Gentile?
Gentile? What is it? He doesn't do halachak netilat yadayim in the morning. Why? It's not even a concept, man. Like, so what about the food that he touches? Says Rabbi David Yosef, en lachush, one should not worry lachmir klal, to be strict about this at all. Umutar, and it's permitted, afilu lechatchila, even ideally, lechol or lishtot, to eat or drink, et otot dvar ma'achal o mashkeh, that food or drink the non-Jew touches.
Because Jew doesn't become tumah.
Because?
Non-Jew, I know.
Does, but in a different extent. Meaning not enough to pass on a ruach ra'ah. We believe this ruach ra'ah concept specifically relates to Jews. Non-Jews don't have this idea of ruach ra'ah, of an evil spirit that rests on them in the morning. And therefore, only Jews have to be careful regarding this halakha. So if a non-Jew touches our food, we don't have to worry about it. Not like there was once a rabbi that told me about a Bnei Brak, that he makes all the Arabs in his kitchen do netilat yadayim when they come into work in the morning. I don't know where that comes from. But he markets his kasher like that. That he's so kosher that even the Arabs working in his factory, they do netilat yadayim in the morning. So now what does that do? Oh, those guys, they don't do netilat yadayim in the morning. How can you eat their food? Hey guys, you didn't look. It's not even a halakha. Where he made it up. So now he's going to have to do it also.
I'd like to
It's
see
a problem.
YouTube on that. That'd be a good YouTube. Here's our...
Nothing wrong.
Nothing wrong with?
Non-Jew workers follow the same custom of their owners.
You're wasting their time and you're wasting water.
How much time you waste? How much time?
But what does it help?
Don't Muslims,
Maybe he should wash his nose 3 times. I don't know, what does it have to do
don't
with?
Muslims wash their hands and feet anyway before prayer in the morning?
At least it's
Yeah, assuming those are from Muslims, you know?
Right.
There's also the problem of the Beit HaKisei with the Muslims too, right?
Well, there's a problem with everybody. You know, the cleanliness is one thing, and then tumah is another thing.
See, there's better kiss Allah, not the hand.
All right, so let's
Yotze B'Benekise. Cliff Tet, it mentions right there.
It's what?
It says something right there in Cliff Tet,
okay.
going to the bathroom. Yotze B'Benekise.
Says Halacha Chavtet, Hayotze Mibet HaKiseh, one who leaves the bathroom. Yizaher should be careful, Shelo Yiga B'Yadav, not to touch with his hands, B'dvar Ma'achal U'Mashkeh, food or drink, Kodem Sheitol Yadav, before he washes his hands.
Es los manos.
Yeah, I guess exactly. It's just I was just thinking this is exactly like the San Diego County Department of Health mandatory restaurant sticker and everything. Right. Grade A, grade B, grade C.
Uvdiavad, but after the fact, Im Naga B'dvar Ma'achal U'Mashkeh, if he touches food or drink, B'Yadav with his hands, Kodem Sheitol Yadav, before he washed his hands after the bathroom, Lo Ne'esar Oto Ma'achal U'Mashkeh, that food or drink has not become prohibited. I mean, the food's okay. Im efshar lichotz et oto ma'achal, and if it's possible to wash that food, yichetzenu shalosh pamim kodem sheochlenu, you should wash it 3 times before you eat it.
Wash the food 3
Wash
times?
the hands.
No,
The fruit, we had this halakha already once before.
Wash the fruit?
You do the Tilat Devarim on the food.
That's what I thought you
It's
said.
very interesting. If you go back to page 71, halakha Chav Dalet, remember we mentioned that Ruach Ra is only from waking up in the morning, not from going to the bathroom. And that's why after you go to the bathroom, technically you're allowed to touch your nose and your ears and your eyes and your mouth. It seems like there's a double standard here, because by food, we're saying that no, you shouldn't touch the food after the bathroom.
It's a different status.
Right, so Rav Chaim Palaji seems to be the one who's strict over here. Rav Chaim Palaji was one of the giants of Sfarad. And it seems like there were other rabbis who were lenient, and so therefore we're trying to be strict when we can, and we can be lenient if we already did such a thing.
It's a funny concept in a way. It's a don't do it, but if you do it, it's okay.
Yes. Like, stay away.
But
Stay away.
What do you think?
it's how pious you are.
I'm afraid of this next halakha. Why?
Let's see where it's,
I'm afraid about it because of the opportunity that it provides people to go crazy.
Because of what?
The opportunity it provides for people to go crazy. Let's do it. Mi shenatal yadav, one who washed his hands, shacharit, in the morning, karaui, properly. V'lachar miken, and afterwards, naga biyadav adam acher, another person touched his hands. Shelo natal yadav shacharit, who did not wash his hands in the morning. You wash your hands. Now your friend comes to shake your hand. Shabbat shalom. You know that he didn't wash his hands halachically in the morning.
Is it okay to ask him?
Should wear a sign. I voted. I washed. It's fitting and proper. That he should go back. He told Yadav b'li bracha and wash his hands again without a bracha.
so you just have to do the Zawatsky elbow greeting.
So, what, it's a sort of like contagious thing, like if somebody touches your hand.
That's what it seems to be suggesting right now.
And, in high school we used to have this thing where we used to go around shaking our hand like this, and a friend would come up and you'd shake his hand, and then he'd pass it around, and everybody would be shaking their hand like that in their class all the time.
Where did
It
you
was
go
like
to school?
being, what?
Where did you go to school?
I'll tell you what, it
I was on the other side of the globe and did the same thing.
It wasn't the yeshiva.
You must have been a frat before you were a little bit younger than me, but you're younger than me.
The spies passed the information on to Moshe Chaim's school district and said, "This is the cutting edge of education in America."
But you wouldn't turn down shaking someone's hand.
No.
Although I know Jews who, like very Orthodox Jews, sometimes will not shake your hand. Or
What?
I've had a.
That's just because they grew up in New York.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
yeah.
and they don't have manners.
Or they go like this.
What?
The limp handshake, I call it the Borough Park handshake. You shake someone at the Borough Park, it's like...
We call it the dead fish handshake.
Yeah, the dead fish.
Samech Tet. Let's look down at the sources. Samech Tet. What is the source of this halakha? See in the Shaar Tzion in our fancy Rashi script over here, we have a Samech Tet in bold, the left column. B'sheilot v'tshuvot, on the questions of answers, Leiv Chaim, written by Rabbi Chaim Palaji. He wrote a book called the Leiv Chaim. Katav le'achmir b'zeh, he says one should be strict about this. V'chen katav od b'sfarav Kaf HaChaim, and he writes in his book Kaf HaChaim, the first one was Leiv HaChaim, the hand of Chaim, the heart of Chaim. This is Kaf HaChaim, the palm of Chaim. And then in his book Veruach Chaim, the spirit of Chaim. And additionally, Vayen od b'sefer Tzava'a Mechaim, the will from Chaim. The will from Chaim was written, seems like, by his son. There's teachings from his father. Sheheid, he testified, B'shem Mor Aviv, in the name of his father, Hagaon Rav Chaim Palaji. In the name of his father, Shekshaya Nogea B'yadayim Shachim, when he touched other people's hands. O Shenashku Yadav, or when they would come kiss his hands. Why would they kiss his hands? Because he was a rabbi, right? In Sfaradim, there never was a time where we didn't kiss our rabbi's hand. Why say our parents? We kiss his hand. That's the halakha. Hayanotel Yadav Miyad, he would immediately go wash his hands. It seems like he was washing it for tuma, not for, gross, get off my hand. I wanted to wash his hands. It was v'lachen, and therefore, what did he do? He would always wear gloves. I have to admit that I sometimes wash my hands after people shake my hands. Either because their hands stink like perfume,
or they're sticky,
cologne, or they're like sweaty or sticky, or like. I'm okay if you just tell me Shabbat Shalom like that. I'm not offended if you don't shake my hand. Sometimes I have to I'll go in and out, get it out the door enough times in Shabbat to wash my hands. Never in a way that should offend somebody. Somebody shouldn't know. But what?
Several times.
It could happen to me. I'm not like 5 times on a Shabbat at a service, because it's a nice thing that when they come in, they all shake my hand before people have a seat. Except for the people who don't like me, then they go that way, right? But Baruch Hashem, most people come and shake my hand before, and it's a nice thing. I appreciate when people say good morning, Shabbat Shalom, yeah. But sometimes, please shake someone else's hand, or shake 10 people's hands before you shake my hand. That way, it's weakens the ruach ra'ah of the cologne from their hands, right? It's a problem. But here, it's not because of cleanliness. It seems to be because of halakha. He was afraid of the tumah, the impurity from other people. This halakha begs a question. What question is it begging?
Well, to me, which washing of the hands do you do, like after people are shaking your hand up?
It seems like the 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. That's what it seems like. It's a good question.
Not the regular for eating.
You're writing here a book in halakha. And what's your source for this halakha? One person's opinion written 5 times in different books of his.
Maybe more than one.
What about the Mishnah Berurah? What about the Chayei Adam? What about the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch? What about all the halakha books we have until today? No, I don't know. I'm not a baki in all of them. It doesn't seem like this halakha is mentioned. It seems like this halakha is purely from the school of thought of Rabbi Chaim Palaji. Now, Rabbi Chaim Palaji was a big name in the Sephardic community, which is probably why he gives him so much weight. But couldn't you easily say that this halakha was done because Rabbi Chaim Palaji was very particular about kedusha, about purity, about holiness?
Wouldn't it then be in the category of minhag?
Compulsive.
Because halakha is something that's accepted in agreement by a group of people, a group of rabbis, right? And a minhag.
It seems here that this Rav Chaim Palaji did it because he felt this was the halakha.
He felt it was. Oh, okay. But what did other rabbis say about his opinion?
From what I see here, they don't. I mean, this is a pretty recent opinion, which is why I'm struggling with this halakha. Because one, it leaves room for people to every time they shake someone's hand to go run to the sink and do chat to them, which I'm afraid of people doing.
You never get out of the bathroom.
Two is
Michael Jackson work on.
Two is I'm also afraid that maybe this halakha is not as well sourced as we would like to believe. That bothers me. Because when you quote a halakha as having to do something,
But it seems sometimes we run into a lot of cul-de-sacs of gray areas. It's fairly often with various things, and it's not fully resolved.
the halakha is not black and white.
Well,
That's true.
it can and cannot be sometimes.
Sometimes it's not.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not.
There isn't always full agreement, and there's still question marks in halakha.
And it's okay if you want to say, listen, I'm strict like Rabbi Chaim Palagi and I wash my hands. Fine. But to add that into the work of halakha, when the previous halachot have numerous sources from different books, I question that judgment. We'll leave this as a question. I question the judgment of adding this into mainstream halakha work. I see this a lot, though. A lot. I read, people send me articles on halakha. Yeah.
Give where they got the information, the sources, not the books.
Yeah.
They don't give the information.
Well, it's telling you the sources, but it's all for one person.
It's not you can look at the back.
Okay, I see this a lot when I read halakhic works. That's why I don't read books in English. Jewish books in English. I don't. The level of halakhic scholarship is horrendous. Horrendous.
It is.
And not just horrendous, but there's a style of... I might have shared the story with you. I met somebody who's a young Kollel guy. I probably did share the story with you. He was telling me he was learning for smicha. Did I share this with you?
Oh, the 10-month smicha?
Well, not the 10. He said he was learning for smicha. I said, who are you learning from? Oh, we're just learning in study partners on our own. Did I tell you the story? Yeah, I told you, right? And I said, well, who's going to give you the smicha? Oh, we're going to find a rabbi to test us and give us smicha. I said, well, where's the integrity of this process? Now, you're learning halakha. Why your Gemara you learn from somebody in tradition? But your halakha, it's like it comes from a book that you sat down and studied.
Language passes the test.
What?
It sounds good.
Passing the test means that you know a certain amount of information. It doesn't mean that you actually know how to weigh things properly in halakha. That's what the test is for. The test is to make sure, do I know that he knows when to say yes and when to say no? On my smicha certificate, my first one that I got, the most important part of that was I asked him in words of halakha, and he knew when to say yes and when to say no. That doesn't mean that he knew which halachot to say yes and no to, but it's the thought process. Does the person know how to put the proper thought process into it? And so what happens when a person skips that whole process? You have what you have today in the world of halakha. I see people send me books, and I look at them or articles, and I read them. You didn't pick up on the finesse of how to learn halakha. Not that I'm an expert. There are poskim much greater than me.
It's a nuance.
But right, it's not just the nuance. Some things you don't even need the nuance. Some things, if it's only written, with all due respect, by one rabbi 20 years ago, and he was the original idea behind this halakha, you cannot sell this to the world as a halakha. You can sell this to the world as the opinion of a very, very influential latter-day rabbi. Not saint, rabbi. But you cannot sell this to me. This is halakha. This is halakha, so why is it not in Shulchan Aruch? Why did Rambam not know about it? Yeah. Why? When you share halachot, you have to... It doesn't mean you can't come up with new ideas or things, but you have today, like everyone comes up with their own ideas, and everyone's doing one thing stricter than the next person, the next person, the next person. I recently spoke to somebody, a rabbi, claims to be a rabbi. He told me that he's strict, that by him, well, it's crazy halakha. I understood him correctly because I asked him if he meant what he said. He said that you can only kosher dishes that come in contact with meat or not kosher. But things that come in contact with dairy, because they're so oily, you can never properly clean the utensil to kosher it, and therefore anything that came in contact with dairy will always be not kosher or will always be dairy. I told him, where in the world is your source for this? Maran doesn't agree with you. The Rambam doesn't agree with you. The Gemara doesn't agree with you. Nobody agrees with you. So who did it? I said, my rabbi, when I was learning for smicha, he told us that that's his personal opinion. With all due respect to your rabbi who was teaching you for smicha, you can sell it off as it's your personal stringency wherever. I don't know why you would even do it, but I don't even understand the logic behind it. But let's assume there is logic behind it. I'll give his rabbi credit. Where is your integrity to tell people this is not a halakha? It's just 4 years old. I don't know, 10 years old, 20 or whatever you get.
Meat is greasier, harder to get off a plate meat fat than dairy.
I didn't want to argue with him.
It's not about reason.
Right? The question here is, where is your integrity? And sometimes when I read these things and I read the sources, you can't do this, you can't do that. You could do this, you could do... Even the other way around. Somebody said you can do something. But what's your source for you being able to do something? How old is your source? So why are you so quick to rely on such a shaky source?
This is a big problem in the modern world in general, though. It's like people say things with not enough to back them up. You see it politics, internet, everywhere you go.
Sure.
People are not going back to sources to make a solid view.
You hear what Zev just said? Maybe it's not just a Jewish epidemic. It's an epidemic in the whole world. Now, I'll tell you.
Especially with the internet.
Yeah, exactly.
The internet has spread many crazy things. You ever get those like chain emails?
A lot of misinformation.
Oh, do they have a research study that shows that you can drop dead from, I don't know, looking at the wall too long, whatever. Oh my God, this is so scary. People start writing to each other in the whole world. And then you have, Baruch Hashem, these beautiful websites like Hoax Slayer or Snopes or these guys. And you put in this word and they say, listen, we researched it. Lo hayav lo nivra. It never was. Someone started an email scam and da-da-da-da. And then I send it. I'm annoying like that. You send me the email, I'm going to send you back an email. Listen, this is a hoax. I get 2 responses. Oh, I can't believe someone sent it to me then. What do you mean? You sent it to me. Right? Two, the second response is, oh, well, it doesn't hurt to be careful.
Yeah.
What do you mean it doesn't hurt to be careful? This was pulled out of somebody's hat when he was bored in the middle of the night. He wrote an email in the name of the University of Maryland and sent it to the whole world. And that's the problem with today. The people don't care if there are sources, why there are sources, who. And it's not. I'm happy you said that. That's the Jewish problem. It's a problem in the whole world. And I'll tell you, this person, they sent me in one summer, it was all about then the war broke out in Israel and the whole thing. I kept getting updates. Oh, this person died today. The prime minister was shot. I said, you don't bother to check the news before you forward these emails? Because in your head, the whole world is dying. Everyone's going... I said, listen, after 5 times, I said, I'm very careful about the things that I read. Please take me off of your email list.
And there are people who read the news 5 years too late, And then they send out this thing about you hear about the bombing that happened. It was 5 years ago.
They just happened to find it on the... And you're right, the people don't care about the sources, where things... And I'm not saying that you don't have the right to ever come up with an opinion. Of course you have the right to have an opinion.
The health industry is real bad at that. One year they'll say the eggs are bad for you. Then the next year they say, no, they're the best thing you can eat is sliced bread. They go back and forth.
Sliced bread is
food, on different food. No, this is bad for you, and then next year they say, no, it's the best.
You know the problem. The problem is who paid them to do the research. That's always going to be the problem. They always look where the money comes from.
Double blind.
Unfortunately, it's going to be like that in Judaism also. Yes. Who paid them to write this book? Who paid them to write this article? Who sponsored somebody to do X, Y, and Z? It's a very dangerous thing. And again, what I'm trying to share with you is someone who doesn't care about the halachic process is very quick to allow or not allow different things. Here, I'm not arguing with Rabbi David Yosef, but in essence what I'm questioning is, where is the integrity of your halachic process? Where if no other source mentions something except for one rabbi, why is it in your book on the top of the page? Put it as a footnote somewhere. Why on the top of the page?
Curiosity, yeah.
Yeah, sometimes, the Mishnah Berurah, the Chavetz Chaim, he was very careful about this. I respect his work, even enough just for this, but he was a huge tzaddik, but his work, he has three commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch that work together. One is the Mishnah Berurah. By the way, these are all plays on the Mishnah Berurah. The second is the Biur Halacha. It's like more in-depth details. And the bottom is the Shaar HaTzion, which is like sources and extras. In the Mishnah Berurah, he only writes what is agreed upon as halacha.
Universally.
His own personal opinions, considerations, thoughts, he doesn't put in the halacha section. He puts it in the Biur Halacha, meaning expansion of the halacha. He allows you to know that this is my opinion. This is what I'm trying to share. And then what happens in later generations, say, oh, the Chavetz Chaim wrote in the Biur Halacha, this is not halacha. But generally you'll know that this is his own, he separates what I would call mainstream halacha from his understanding of halachic scenarios. And then at the bottom, the Shaar HaTzion is all his sources, and very often he'll throw a random, oh, and this rabbi said you should be strict about that. So they always say, how do you know a really religious person? When he ignores everything inside of the Mishnah Berurah and he only keeps the little footnotes on the bottom, right? That's what makes you super holy. However, the Chavetz Chaim thought it was so important that you should keep it, he would have put it in the book of halacha. But the fact that he resorted to putting it down there at the bottom, it's like, oh, good to know. Not necessarily good to keep. But someone who doesn't care about the halachic process won't differentiate between these three different works of the Chavetz Chaim and will use them equally. That's always going to be a problem. It's always going to be a problem.
So can I came in late, so I just understand, is this all this interpretation a result, a commentary on the fact that you shouldn't touch your mouth and hands and ears and eyes?
Absolutely.
Where you haven't gone to the hemorrhoid business and the beer and the liquor?
We did all that already. Oh, the beer we're going to talk about right now. The beer I should have done before, but I didn't want to get everyone confused. The beer, not beer. What beer? We're going to do that right now.
The beer, not the beer. That's good, yeah.
The top of 72 in Shulchan Aruch. Velo yiga. You see, hey, the Shulchan Aruch on the top, 72. Velo yiga. One should not touch begigit shecha, when the barrel of wine. Shouldn't touch a barrel of wine. Shemishmush hayad, because the touching of the hand, mafsid hashecha, causes you to lose the beer.
Oh, it spoils it.
Causes you to lose
The beer.
Shemishmush of the hayad, it's like the sticking of the hand.
The touching of the hand, the moving of the hand.
You meant a beer barrel. Not
Yeah,
a wine
it
barrel.
says impairs the beer.
What did I say?
You said wine barrel.
I meant the beer barrel. I said wine?
Doesn't matter.
You said wine.
I apologize, yeah.
It says beer here, but the other one said liquor, so you figure it
No,
out.
it's known that certain fermented products like sauerkraut, things like that. If someone sticks their hand in a jar of it or a barrel of it,
Yeah.
ferment it, freeze it, or spoil it. Because the bacteria off your hands are the wrong bacteria, so it changes the fermentation.
It was spoiled.
But that's like more of a physical thing than
So bring me the Mishnah Berurah from my office, please. I don't know what it is. My key is right here.
Does it matter what is barrel made of?
This one says you can touch
Actually, my office is open.
liquor because it touches the hand.
It's the volume 1 of the
Yeah, but
Mishnah Berurah.
that's not a halakha about red raw. That's about a physical law,
And then
a
this
science
one
law.
says that you shouldn't touch a vat of beer because handling it impairs the beer. Impairs the beer. One says it spoils it, one impairs it.
Well, there's similar outcome. You know,
Yeah.
you can't drink it.
Yeah.
You wouldn't drink it; it would be low quality, right?
But I mean, it's all spiritual anyway. It's not like physical.
No, but for anyone, if
Perfect,
anyone's
thank you.
hand, Jew, non-Jew, touched the beer, I don't think it's ritually impure. It becomes just unfit to drink. That's what we
I don't think
Barrel
that.
was the beer.
I think it's spiritual.
So what's the word shkar? Shkar is a barrel of beer. That's the word.
Shaar, it's like a shikar.
Well, it says
mafsid.
Velogia
supposed to be like
begigi
vodka or something.
begigi shkar.
Well,
It's
isn't that
stronger
what
than
shikar
wine.
comes from? The word shikar. You know, shikar is
A drunk.
drunk.
Yeah.
I think it's the same root of the word.
Yeah, in the Torah it always says, the wine and...
So the word for barrel is what? That's the begigit.
So
But just the previous halakha, I have in my notes from when I was in when I was high school. I wrote in my notes, I underlined that there's a Orchot HaChaim. There's a rabbi who writes that when a person washes their hand once, it completely rids themselves of Ruach Ra. So even though we don't follow that opinion, it could be that that's who we're lenient, that's who we rely on when it comes to someone else touching the food. Oh, no, that's not what I meant to say. Mechila. Mistake. What if a person only washes one hand? That's what I meant to say. Not wash once their hand. They're washing one hand. I don't want to wash my left hand today.
Whatever their dominant hand is, if the right hand is washed, it's okay.
Let me ask something. What's the sound of one hand washing?
The Orchot HaChaim says that if you wash only one hand, the Ruach Ra leaves that one hand.
But the other one is still contaminated, all right.
Yeah.
Well, the Muslims only eat with their right hand because they wipe with their
the left.
Is that true?
Yeah, I've heard that before.
Which is interesting. They never eat with that hand.
Wow.
That's why Shaar is so troubling for the.
And Mishnah Berurah adds one shouldn't smoke tobacco before they do until that tonight.
Before that, because it stays on your hands even if you wash
Because,
it.
you want to kill yourself, fine, but don't do it with Ruach Ra.
You're right. Nobody here is a smoker. Nobody smokes, right? I don't think anybody does that.
Baruch Hashem.
I just burn boxes in my office and it smells like I smoked something.
I quit in 1987, the hard way. No patch, good for the patch.
It's good.
Yeah, cold turkey.
Not easy to do. It's
No,
the hardest drug to
it
stop.
was very difficult.
The most difficult drug to stop.
I failed about at least 12 times before I finally succeeded.
It's very difficult.
Okay, for one, I'm seeing in the beer halacha of the Mishnah Berurah. He seems to understand you should not touch the barrel of wine after you wash your hands because it could physically damage the beer. The beer. I keep saying wine. Beer.
Physically,
That's what I said.
Physically damage the beer?
Yeah, but before you wash your hands, nothing can happen to it.
Right.
Meaning that the impurity, it's not a problem to touch a barrel from the outside,
Oh, outside.
impurity-wise. It's not touching the inside. The Bach, the Taz, and the Vilna Gaon seem to say that no, this halakha has to do with Ruach Ra, with impure spirit, and touching the barrel from the outside will eventually cause the inside of the barrel to become impure, and it will harm those who drink the beer. And therefore, that's what the Shulchan Aruch is trying to tell you.
Wouldn't you, forgive me for being like this, but wouldn't you need a certain thickness or dimension for it to be able to get through, or is it just get through anything?
It doesn't seem like they're worried about getting...
The material, what kind of material it's supposed to be? Metal or wooden?
In the old days, they used
All of them are the
If you
same.
don't touch the beer directly,
With
how
barrels.
can you possibly...
They seem to understand that even if you touch the vessel holding the beer, you would be passing off Ruach Ra.
Really? Yeah.
But then that would mean that if someone's raw around their hands, if they touch your hand and you have gloves on, that it can get through the gloves.
I can look up in a difference in 1 second.
It's sort of like heat. Heat can go through and conduct. Somehow it conducts through, or like electricity. It somehow
Or like
conducts.
heat.
I must tell you that when I first read this halakha, I passed through it. I didn't stop to
Dig in.
delve into the details of the beer and...
Well, that was different because that covers the beer, it doesn't cover the hand. The hand is naked.
Understand. But
So it's
to
a different-
penetrate through material into another substance, especially
Well,
if it's not hot. I mean, it's like with kashrut. There are certain types of vessels because
But that's
they're
not
porous, others are porous. Some
It's ritualistic, but it's not spiritual. It's a physical thing, whereas this is, I think, spiritual.
Yeah, you guys
Yeah,
remember
but
like
there are
the
laws
particle.
for that too. There are principles to how that happens. It isn't just a random thing, right? I mean, how are we defining Reach Ra? In what context? And how is Reach Ra spread?
Mm-hmm.
What does it contact? Is it hot or cold? Washing this, that, materials? I think doesn't that all have to be considered? I mean, I think it's like we're discussing something without a certain set of parameters.
I really
how
want
to
to know
do
what the
it.
physics of rough riding. Yeah.
It's like a little arbitrary without enough information. At least for me,
But
it
what's
is.
so special about liquor anyways? I mean, why is liquor singled out here and not
Food in a container.
in the container?
Yeah, I mean, like, why not vegetables in a container?
Yeah.
Listen, the Aruch HaShulchan seems to say like the latter opinion. He says, "V'chein asur liga b'chol machal." Not that. V'chein lo yiga b'gigit shechar. A person not touch a barrel of wine. V'kol sheken kodem etilah, especially before they wash their hands. The machnis ruach ra'a la shechar, because he will be imbuing the shechar with ruach ra'a. He'll be penetrating the barrel and giving the ruach ra'a to the barrel, and people who drink from the barrel will get hurt.
You mean hurt physically
They
or
will be hurt
Yeah,
anyway.
or spiritually.
hurt spiritually?
It seems like he's talking about this. This.
Spiritually?
They're not really meshes what we said before about transmission.
Which is?
Seems to seem more lenient than some of the other situations that we were in this week. It seems a little bit more stringent.
Right. It seems like we've taken a lenient approach to Ruach Ra in general because of the few opinions that we brought. Either Ruach Ra is weakened or it doesn't exist anymore. Whereas these books are not going under that assumption. They're not using that as their guiding light. Fascinates me. The Kaf HaChaim didn't say anything about it. Oh, well, I go far. The Beit Yosef, Maran, and the Beit Yosef, but the president of this halakha, he says one shouldn't touch his barrel, even if he did it not today. What does that tell you?
Need a robot.
Is it about Ruach Ra?
Like beer.
It seems like, and I don't have the Beit Yosef in my
Well,
office,
it
but
can't be rough if you already washed your hands, because then it's no longer an issue.
do you mind giving me my Bet Yosef also? Can I? It's there's a black and green set. It's going to be the first volume. Turn all the way to the right.
If you wash, it's not an issue with rough.
Right, and therefore it seems like you would be worried about the physical touching of the barrel, not actually a Ruach Ra problem here. That's what the Bet Yosef seems to say, at least according to the Kaf HaChaim, but I want to
But with
see
beer,
inside.
we also have non-Jews touching, because it's not like yayin where you have to have a real stringent process
Right.
of Jews, supervision, pressing, this and that. With beer, it's not an issue. So again, the status is different.
different. We'll see.
But doesn't all this point to the fact that there are spiritual forces around us that we're not aware of?
Right.
Yeah.
But here
that
we're
affect us
we're
on-
saying that maybe
that
that's not what we're worried about. Maybe we're actually worried about a physical thing, which then begs the question: so what is it doing here? What is halakha doing right here? So I would love to see the source. What?
This one?
I don't think so.
No.
It's going to be the one that says Aleph.
Oh, it was like that was.
It might be on the table, maybe. Could it? Yeah, it doesn't help us. Yeah.
And, how do we do it like the same after intimate relationships? 1, 1,
1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2.
3, 2.
Yes. Some say also before.
Before.
I saw such an opinion. Again, I can't tell you that it's a definitive halakha. Thank you.
So it's going
I think it's to put a person in before that they're doing something holy. Kedusha. It's not yet my thoughts on the matter, but I'd have to look into those halakhot again. That's how I understand it. You don't understand how brilliant Maran was, by the way. You have to...
Brilliant what?
Maran. Rabbi Yosef Karo. He made halacha like... You know what we have to do if we didn't have a bit? Sometimes I wonder about it. Like when I look on Beit Yosef, it's like he did all the work for us. We have no excuse. He did everything for us. Incredible. This is the person before they had, Google, and before the Bar Ilan, research project, you can look up a word. It's about a person who all of this by heart, where to find, where to look, where. Unbelievable. How can they even skip this whole concept? The Beit Yosef is a commentary on which book? The Tur, Shulchan Aruch, right? The Tur. And he wrote a commentary called the Beit Yosef. And from the Beit Yosef, his commentary on the Tur, he made a concise book of halachot called the Shulchan Aruch. Right? He said, if you look at Rabbeinu, the Tur, he only quotes a few things that you cannot touch. Your eyes, your ears, your mouth. He doesn't mention, not the barrel of beer, and also not the piyat tabat, not down below. Why? Says Rabbi Yosef Kazan, beautiful. He says, separate two things here. One is ruach ra. Ruach ra, that's before you wash your hands. After you wash your hands, you can touch your eyes, your nose, your mouth, your ear. He says, but the reason why the Torah didn't quote it is because these halachot have nothing to do with ruach ra. Rather, touching down below is never a good idea because it can lead to all kinds of illnesses. Like, remember you mentioned?
Yeah. Right.
Whereas we took a mystical twist to it. Yeah. He's saying that's not why he said it. He didn't speak about Kabbalah here, he's speaking about halakha. Halakha is that it's a dangerous thing, you shouldn't do it. And the same thing is about the barrel of wine. He says before you do Tilat Yadayim, absolutely you're going to make it tamei like you make anything else tamei when you touch it. He says, but afterwards you also can't touch it. Which is why the Torah, he says, doesn't mention the barrel of wine. But he mentions the barrel of wine because it seems to have been mentioned in the Gemara and he wants to quote it in the right place, next to everything else that was mentioned. Which is now the question, so why did those rabbis go out of their way to understand this in a mystical fashion as opposed to the halachic fashion?
Well, it's very hard.
What's your idea on that? I have no idea.
How can you... I mean, a reasonable mind would say by touching a vat of liquor, it wouldn't physically change it. Physically, it will...
Imagine a non-Jew touching a bottle of wine that's not mevushal. The touch is what makes the difference. Even if it's in a bottle. It could be the same idea, that touching is... You're moving, you made an impression on something.
It must be the nature of alcohol, because if there was a difference as touching a barrel of wine than of whiskey.
When I say wine, I mean whiskey, beer, by the way. I don't mean wine. I just... In my head,
it doesn't have a ritual status, but it does have alcohol. Alcohol is a...
Does anybody know how to make beer? Is there really a problem of moving beer, of touching beer?
Yeah, in terms of fermentation.
What does it do?
If you put your hand in it.
Oh, really?
What if you shake the barrel?
It'll just fizz.
No, there's no problem touching the barrel from the outside physically. It's touching the beer itself can sour or spoil it because of the germs on your hand.
There's that bar trick. If you take a bottle of beer and you take off the cap and you just go like, bam, with one solid, like boom, like this, it'll foam out all over.
But it depends what the container is made of, because it can permeate a wooden barrel to some point when you touch the outside of the barrel, you're actually touching what's
wet.
inside. Yeah. It's not going to
enough to drip out. We're not here. We're talking about probably wood
substance.
So what are the
but not in a ceramic
Maran uses?
For this halakha,
Yeah.
Maran is quoting a piece of Talmud from Masechet Shabbat. Okay. I'm going to look into this overnight, Mizal Hashem.
Okay.
And right now I'm going to make a phone call to a friend of mine who makes beer. We're going to ask him.
Don't drink.
Don't drink. I don't drink anyway. It's okay. Baruch Hashem. Have a beautiful evening.